Hello, everyone! Welcome to the Chaotic Wholesome Talk Show. My captions are incorrect. They are white and they are not showing up at all. This is only my thing. I should, have this down. Hi, I'm Kay. I'm fixing my captions. David, you were responsible and did yours. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm David. This is Kay.
That is correct. And now my captions are actually readable. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Look at all these people. We got Kira's hanging out. We got Dungeon Master Ty. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for hanging out. I'm Kay. I do a lot of TTRPG stuff. You may have seen me this weekend when I did a stream to celebrate completing the shiny Pokédex. Yeah, that was
It's
the thing.
is it done? Is it like fully done?
So it is everything through every Pokemon available in Sword and Shield. I'm still missing a couple of the evolutions and the forms from Arceus, but I
Hmm.
got until November to get those done.
Right.
Um, but everyone's here for TTRPGs, and I'm talking about Pokemon. But guess what? This is just what life is going to be right now. There's a Pokemon Milcery, which is a little milk thing. And if you give it a sweet and then you spin in the game, it evolves into an Alcremie, a whipped version of it with the little candy in its hair. There are 70 versions of this Pokemon.
7-0.
7-0. Because there are 7 sweets that it can have, and there are 10 colors, plus, I guess there's 77, because then there's the shiny versions on top of that. So, I spent 2 hours on stream spinning and evolving these things. That was my big celebration stream. And we gave away some shinies,
Good.
but yeah, I got to do that. I'm just failing today, y'all. I didn't put on music. We were on early. We had time to set up, but guess what? Guess what?
I guess your dittos were working overtime.
Guess. I would like to log in, please. Here we go. Oh, and that's so yes, hi, welcome. As you may have seen from my crawl, the slideshow, I got some stuff going on this month. Every Tuesday, find David and I right here doing the Chaotic Wholesome Talk Show. We have had some amazing people leave comments on our YouTube videos. We may have gotten a little emotional about that. I'm not gonna lie. We're a small
A little bit.
channel, y'all. We get real excited. We have an amazing chat who hangs out here every time we do this. I don't know why so many of you are amazing and want to hang out, but I am so grateful. And we cover everything from hot takes to indies to intersectionality. If you have a topic which you would like us to cover, that can be anything from a streaming, an actual play that you would like to promote, to uh, a book, a series, to just your experience, be it a personal thing around identity within tips for crafting and building worlds. We'd love to have you on. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover, please suggest it. Thank you so much for all of your support, all of your comments, all of your retweets, all of your suggestions. Y'all are amazing. Like,
And if you know somebody who you think might be interested but doesn't necessarily know us well, have them reach out. You can find us on Twitter very easily.
yes. So, that is my whole spiel. Find us here every Tuesday doing this. Um, I'm very close to getting my vanity URL on YouTube, so y'all are just amazing, and I thank you. Um, every other Wednesday this month, you can find me on the Emergency Power Podcast. Um, new episodes release on the 6th and the 20th this month. I play a wonderfully terrible character. I've had fun doing some promo for that because I like playing shady characters. I really do.
There have been some fun snippets that have been leaked to me, so you guys are in for a treat.
You can find that over at the emergencypowernetwork.com. The Emergency Power Podcast is in its 3rd season. However, if you want to just jump in with season 3, we've got both written summaries of what happened previously in the Discord. We have audio summaries if you want to listen to just a recap of what happened in the first 2 seasons. And also, we spend time within the game actually recapping what happened, so you can just dive right in if you want to. And if you decide you like it, there's 2 seasons of backlog. And this coming Saturday, I am so excited and so honored to be on Gamer Mama Luna's channel, or Gamer Mom Luna, and I'm going to be playing in an Extra Life charity stream where I'm going to be playing with Dungeon Glitch as the GM, who's an amazing GM, playing Roxy, my half-orc paladin of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, for charity. So that's going to be actually 10 a.m. Eastern, so that's going to be a little bit early, but I'm going to hype myself up on coffee, and we're going to do a fun thing for charity. So, that's all of the promos. I swear. We're going to talk about the thing we're here to talk about. And this is something that I feel is pretty important because we're in interesting times. We've had some stuff going on for a while. We've all been through a world-altering pandemic. We've watched the Black Lives Matter movement. We've watched the rise in Asian Pacific Islanders hate. Not that those things didn't exist before, they've just been brought to a spotlight. Here in my home country of America, I now have fewer protections than a gun. So, you know, that's fun. Some stuff is actively right now going on in Britain.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty interesting.
And Sri Lanka, and Ukraine, and Russia, and many other places.
There was a mass shooting in
Denmark? Copenhagen.
Denmark? Near Stockholm, outside Stockholm. Sweden. And that's like really unheard of for that. It's not like gun violence in America where it happens all the time, because that's totally normal. Like, it's very... So, a lot's happening, and it can be very easy to be like, all this is happening, everything is terrible, why am I doing this? Why are people making actual plays? Why should I show up to D&D? Why are we doing any of this? Why is anyone consuming fiction when real life is bigger and worse and so much more? And I felt like it was important for us to take a minute and kind of talk about that.
Especially when it comes to the pandemic, there is a very easy, very observable example of why. And the answer to that is Tiger King.
David was late to the Tiger King.
It was extremely late to the Tiger King. And one of my first comments to Kay was, oh my God, the normies are watching this. The normies have watched this. They are not prepared for all... Like, I had some understanding of all the different things that went on in that show. And so most of that stuff didn't catch me completely off guard. Wasn't completely alien to me. But, like, there are housewives and, like, construction workers and, like, teachers where their whole world had to be shattered by Tiger King. And it happened right at the beginning of the pandemic. Like when people were at home baking bread and, wiping off their groceries as they got delivered, and all the other things that we did at the beginning of the pandemic.
Feeding their yeast starter.
Right. They sat down and they watched Tiger King. And on Reddit, there was this GIF of search terms by state, by top search terms every month by state, and it was a GIF that stretched over
Nostalgia. Yes, the
a couple of
nostalgia.
years, and ooh wee, for like 3 straight months, the number one search term in every state in the United States was Tiger King. Um, and while I have some objections to the normies being subjected to that, it also showed how important it was, not only that we had something that was a departure from a really troubling, traumatizing event that we were all experiencing, but that we all had this, I wouldn't say positive, but we all had this curious, um, talk worthy shared experience that got us all together. Um,
Some of
and so,
us.
well, yeah, most of you. And so everyone was talking about it. Everybody was looking it up. People got on Zoom calls and in Discords, all across the country.
People made
And
their Animal Crossing islands, recreations of the GW Zoo. I don't know how to do
right,
that.
right,
I didn't make a comic about it while I was at Red Bull.
right, and all of those things helped not just to distract us, but it gave us an anchor point where we could just hold on and connect with other people, especially the people important to us, for something other than, oh my God, there's a pandemic outside.
Yeah.
Um,
And sea shanties. Sea
right.
shanties came back, and that was great because it was like the point of a sea shanty was like you could jump in at any point. It didn't matter what part of the ship you were on. You could just hop in and start singing, "Hey crew." Um, and sea shanties came back because didn't matter where in the world you were, if you knew the song, you could hop in at any point, add your harmony, add to the thing, and come up with something beautiful together. Which,
And mhm.
no, go, go.
And so media, the power of media, as part of the social makeup, as part of our social glue, is really important. Like, talk to anybody over 50 years old and ask them about Roots airing on TV and the last episode of MASH. And everyone remembers where they were. Everyone has a story about it. And everyone remembers the connectivity they felt with not just their peers, but with but with strangers. And so we have all these terrible things where we remember where we were. Like, if you're old enough, you remember where you were on 9/11. I personally remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when the LA riots happened. I mean, I happen to live in LA. So um, the Challenger crash, like, people who were around, they know what they were doing. And so to have an anchoring event that we all share that isn't a tragedy and instead is this positive shared experience is great and important for the social fabric.
And it ties into why do we tell stories and why are stories important. And I steal a lot of my um, talking points about this from B. Dave Walters because why try to do something original when that wheel has been invented? And B. Dave put it better than I probably could. Um, he says to me, to him, to me also, storytelling is something divine. Forget clerics, it's bards. Because stories are how we learn about the world and how we learn our place in the world and how we learn how to overcome and how we learn how to communicate and express and when to give up and how to not give up. And that is a thing that we are doing when we do actual plays, when we tell stories that are streamed, or even when you sit down at a table, either as a GM or as a player, with your friends. You all are together telling a story, either of a world that you want to share, creating a reality that you wish you could live in now, or you're telling stories of overcoming injustice, of empowerment, of making the world a better place. And there is little more valuable to me personally than having that story to cling to in a moment. Ty says stories are fundamental to our human experience, and that is absolutely true.
There was research that was done about the connection between language and writing. And the reason that there are problems like dyslexia is that language in our brains is not written. When we think in language in our heads, the auditory and vocal parts of the brains light up. And then the mechanical function to write the language is secondary. Because at its nature, language is spoken, language is heard. And since before the dawn of writing, there was language, there was that communication. And even now, there are traditions in Africa and South America and Australia where stories are told that predate writing, that predate Western civilization. And I forget which culture it is, but the griot is literally the storyteller for the tribe, the person who sits and listens and memorizes every story that the previous griot had, and they pass it down and add to it generation after generation after generation. The most fundamental human experience you can have is sitting around a fire at night, eating something and talking to one another. And everyone who gets serious about writing encounters the same obstacle at some point. Either, why am I trying to tell a story when everyone else has already told it? Or, I am one of 7 billion people, my story can't be unique. But what we all have to realize is that ultimately, fundamentally, we all are storytellers. Each and every one of us in a circle of people will say, oh, I remember when I fell off of that slide, here's what happened. Or, well, when I was younger, my mom made blank for me when I was sick. Or, my dad taught me how to do blank. Or, all of these like fundamental experiences, as a kid with older people, whether it's your mother or father, grandfather, grandmother, aunts and uncles, or even if you were an orphan, you have tales from orphanages. Like, we wouldn't have anime superheroes if there weren't dead parents. And so fundamental is essential, or I'm sorry, storytelling is an essential part of what it means to be human and what it means to relate to and interact with others. And so other people will argue this and they'll be wrong. Everyone's story is important. Just like when you're standing in a circle at a party and somebody has a story to chime in, no matter how similar or different their story is, that their story is important to the conversation, to the group in that moment, because it brings us together. um, and all writing and many types of music and many types of film and TV and media and many pieces of art, all those are is a form of storytelling.
So, when I was tweeting that this was our topic for today, I said, I'm gonna ask our chat some questions, a question, and you don't have to answer right away. But I would encourage you while we're talking. I want you to think about it and see if you can find a good answer. We've all faced something terrible, and we've all been in a low point, and we found that one piece of media that got us through it. Whether it was, for a lot of people, it was the Tiger King during the pandemic, right? It can be a book, a movie, a video game, an actual play, a D&D session, or a series that you played with your friends. Start thinking about what was that piece of media, what was that art, what was that thing that got you through a low point. That's my challenge to you. Just start thinking of that, and as you kind of decide what that is, drop it in the chat if you're willing. For me, as much as we talk, David and I talk a lot about Tiger King, because Tiger King hits real close to home, y'all. I could talk about my ties to the Tiger King. It's uncomfortably close
We could
to
do
home.
a whole episode on Tiger King, and it would be hilarious.
But actually for me, when the pandemic hit, I was working at a job that really didn't value any input that I had. I was actively trying to help and actively being shut down. So I was facing this depression from that pandemic. I was still reeling from a bunch of Me Too stuff, which brought up a lot of...
Oh yeah, I remember that. Ooh,
yeah, it was
there was so much there.
There was so much, and I'm a very power forward, don't really think about it, put it in a suitcase and stack it against the wall and don't think about it person. And it suddenly became very clear to me that my suitcases were wobbling and they were gonna start falling over. And I was like, I need something to get me through.
Yeah, you were in the middle of the milk crate challenge.
Yeah, it was a time. And for me, the thing that I found that helped me was Critical Role. And I talk a lot about Critical Role. I obviously love Critical Role. If you look at my background, if you look at the name of my cat, I'm very critical about parts of Critical Role. There are things about it that should be better. It is very white. It's getting better. It took a while to get there. Especially Vox Machina, there were a lot of social issues that didn't make it into the anime because they cleaned a lot of that up. But for me, it was this thing. Now, number one, there was at least Critical Role is your free square, yes. For those watching the YouTube, David said if there was a bingo card for Chaotic Wholesome Talk Show, the Critical Role reference is your free square. Number one, it seemed, especially being early on in camp, it seemed like there was an endless amount of content. It felt like I could watch all of the Critical Role I could handle and never run out. And that was very comforting and very necessary with state it was. But also, and especially for me, no secret, I like Mighty Nine more than I like Vox Machina. I like Vox Machina. I like Mighty Nine more than I like Vox Machina. And if you know me, it makes perfect sense why. Number one, Mighty Nine had this very, both, let's be honest, pretty much all TTRPG parties are a found family story. But Mighty Nine was a clusterfuck bunch of misfits. found family story, and they all were messed up, and they all had issues. And yes, again, that's most TTRPG, but they were also the X-Men of TTRPG. They were doing the wrong things, but for the right reasons, and fucking stuff up and getting away with it, and running and getting out with the skin of their teeth. And they were not the golden heroes that Vox Machina were. They were not the Avengers. And I love me an underdog. I mess everything up, but somehow still I'm always trying to do the right thing story. So for me, Critical Role just hit all of those buttons of like groups of people coming together, telling stories, supporting each other, being shady, doing bad things, but ultimately doing the right thing. And I can see, looking back, exactly why that pushed every one of those buttons. And if I had tried to marathon Critical Role 2 years before the pandemic, I don't think it would have hit the same way. It would have worked. Wouldn't have hit the same way. So, we also bingo Marva series in order. That, yeah, we usually... I mean, I don't have any X-Men anything in my background.
Right.
I don't know where you're getting that from. But, yeah, David, start thinking of what you might have an answer for. But Ty, start thinking, when you started watching Critical Role, was there a thing? Can you look back and figure out what button that pushed for you? And go, David.
So, two things spring to mind. One is whenever I'm having a bad time, and having like a real bad time over a period of time, the two things that I can always watch without any trouble is really terrible anime, because your brain turns off and you just watch the colors on the screen and it's fine. But also, I love watching horror movies when things aren't looking so great. And that's because I've always had a fascination with the Christian occult. So whether it is like demonic possession, or like angel comes down and has some business, or the end of days, just all that stuff I find really fascinating, really interesting. But I can watch those things and take a break from the very real world, very like, this is happening to me right now, things that I'm dealing with. And the other thing that I have watched in times of, oh, and don't even get me started about video games, because like, there is a boss in a game. I love the From Software games because apparently I hate myself. In Sekiro Shadows Die Twice.
I got no room to talk.
Right. The last boss is really hard. I'd argue the hardest boss out of all of the From Software games. That last boss is a doozy. To the point whereby he goes, haha, I see your swordsmanship is great, so I'm going to pull out a gun. And you're like, really? And it was when I was having trouble with my anxiety, when I was having trouble with my depression. In case you didn't know, depression and anxiety impact your reaction times and impact your ability to focus. So this boss was twice as hard. But because I could slam my head against this over and over and over and over and over again, the hours I spent white knuckling a controller is hours that I didn't spend staring at a wall, staring at a ceiling, and eating myself alive. But the other TV show is Archer. And the reason, so like, I'm not a big comedy guy, and especially if I'm feeling bad, I don't want to necessarily laugh. But the humor is so dark and so slapstick. And also, each character has a different mental disorder, completely untreated, completely unrecognized. And it is slapstick. It is darkly funny. It oftentimes really sad. but I could just look at all of these people with like mental health issues slamming into one another and just causing disasters and go, well, at least, what I'm dealing with and the people I'm dealing with aren't like that. Like there isn't an ocelot in a train car somewhere that we have to deal with. Um, and that has been a big help. I have rewatched like the first like 5 seasons of Archer 4 or 5 times, which for me is a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned video games. I actually started hunting shiny Pokemon because I was working at a job that I was overworked and understimulated. If that
Yep,
if that rings.
I've been there.
I had mountains and mountains and mountains of mostly mindless, often terrible to deal with work that I had to do. And most of it was I was just going through reports as fast as I could. There was no end in sight. There was no hope in sight. I was never going to break even, much less catch up. And at the time, Pokemon was on the 3DS, or just the DS, I forget. But there was a horde encounter mechanic where I could I could stand in an area and make a group of Pokemon appear. Hit Sweet Scent, a group of Pokemon would appear. I wasn't even looking at the screen. I had one earbud in as I was doing my tickets, and they would appear, and I'd listen. And if there was a shiny Pokemon, you'd hear, ka-ching! I can ping. You can play the shiny Pokemon sound as a ringtone on a cell phone on the other side of a room in a party. And I will be
like, shiny.
Where? Because that's all I did, is I just hit random encounter, run away. Random encounter, run away. And that is how I dealt with a very depressing space. Is that a storytelling? Well, that's the other part of what I want to talk about, because yes, video games and TTRPGs and books and movies and media and all of this entertainment, it tells stories, which are fundamental to us. But even if you're not telling the most insightful story, even if it's Archer and it's very slapstick, you are giving someone an escape. And shiny hunting began as just a pure, I can escape for just a moment because I've been at it for 2 days and now I hear that shiny sound. And I can catch that Pokemon. And while I will never catch up on the work that I have to do, I now have a shiny Pokemon to add to my collection. And for some reason, that little sense of accomplishment once a week, once every 2 weeks, was all I needed. So that is, and I kind of jumped into this point because I feel like this is a later in the stream point, but your story matters. The story that you want to tell matters. Regardless of if you are on a platform with an actual play and you are Matt Mercer with tens of thousands, maybe millions of people watching. It doesn't matter if you are David sitting down with me and the Chuckle Fucks every Sunday and we're praying to the Flying Spaghetti Monster and practicing the marinara move.
Yeah.
Your story matters. You are telling a story from your heart, from your soul. You are entertaining people. And even if you don't think your story is unique or that interesting, you're giving a distraction to people who probably very much need it.
And let's also key into the power of the mundane. Because, people complain, oh, well, my story is unoriginal. It is, the hero's journey. You find some kid in a village and he's actually so-and-so's, or all these other tropes that we find, especially in sci-fi and fantasy. And I'd argue the reason that those tropes exist is because they connect with people. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel, because sometimes what you want is the expected. It's why so many people watch The Office over and over and over and over again and still laugh at the jokes.
Oh,
I That's not something I get into. Um, but there are people who do that. But what I will do is the next Transformers or Jurassic Park film, like I'm go to theater because I am promised two things. One, either giant robots or giant dinosaurs fighting it out, and two, the good guys win. And we can argue and we can critique about how you get from point A to point B. And I am guilty of walking out of a film and going, "Yep, that was a movie. That was 90 minutes of movie." But there's something to be said for sometimes you just want to go and watch somebody do cool martial arts for 2 hours. Sometimes you want to go and sit and watch a dragon fly around. Sometimes you want to go and watch Tom Cruise be a nutcase on screen. And let me tell you, having gone back and watched like a couple Tom Cruise being a nutcase on screen, top notch viewing. Top notch.
so I'm going to go super nerdy here. And I'm going to prove that there's power in the mundane, and everyone wants the mundane. Now, first off, I'm going to point to a shopping episode. Because
Right.
there's going to be like 4 people who are like, I hate shopping. People love a shopping episode. You make a dedicated shopping episode, and yes, like 4 people are going to bounce and be like, I hate these episodes. But so many people are going to be there to see the haggling, to see what goes wrong. So, okay. But that's not the super nerdy deep cut. I'm just saying shopping episode proves. You can take any Jurassic Park, any Transformers, you can take Critical Role, you can take any superhero, anything, you can take Lord of the Rings, pick any, just in your mind, I want you to imagine the biggest, most epic quest, impossible odds piece of media you have consumed. From Final Fantasies to Lord of the Rings, like Star Wars, just the biggest, most dramatic, whatever you were thinking of. I guarantee you, if you go to Archive of Our Own,
Oh boy.
there are at least 300 coffee shop AU fanfictions where these characters who fight gods and face impossible odds are working in a coffee shop. And people write these and people consume these. There is power in the mundane.
My writing partner and I have this thing that independent of AO3 where she and I are big horror fans, we're big sci-fi fans. She's a bigger comic book nerd than I am. And about once a month we'll be sitting and talking about like random things, and she'll be like, you know what's a good idea if we did such and such and made it a horror movie? And I'm like, yeah, that'd be a good idea. And then she'd be like, but what if those same characters were baristas? And I'm just like, what? Like there's a Winnie the Pooh horror movie that is either out or coming out very shortly that I am dying to see.
Yes.
I don't care how good it is, I have to see it. And
no red shirt, Winnie the Pooh.
And I was talking to her, and she was just like, "Oh, well, what if the characters from Alice in Wonderland were baristas? What if, Piglet and Christopher Robin and Eeyore and all those people were at a coffee?" And I was like, "Really? Like the coffee shop?" She's like, "Yeah." And before she even ever went down the rabbit hole of AO3, by the way, she went down the rabbit hole of AO3. We always had this idea, and the ones that we're actually probably going to turn out at some point. I'm not going to mention them on stream, but there are at least 3 where we're actually going to sit down and write them. and they're gonna be good and interesting. Because it's almost like social places where like food and drink are exchange is essential to the human experience. Um, from those early CR episodes that healed my inner young person. Oh,
Yes. Yeah, Dungeon Master Ty said for him, it's his thing is also Critical Role. There was an authentic friend group vibe, and I feel like for me that was a big, much the same, totally Ty for me. Like watching that during the pandemic when I was separated from my friends, when we couldn't get together. We'd done some in-person Pathfinder campaigns. We couldn't do it anymore,
mm-hmm.
and even though I knew I wasn't at that table, just being around that vibe of friends at a table, genuine friendship, telling stories together, challenging each other, trusting each other, like that was great. As a forever DM, Ty says Matt was such the perfect DM for me in my early RPG emergence. And there's an emotion unnameable from those early Sierra episodes that healed his inner young person. Emotion that resonates through all of the nerdy things I love. Yes. And again, I said this earlier on, but I mean, part of why I really like it, I have a lot of friends who I love and respect, and they do awesome things, who are really wanting to do like really urging me to participate in like solo RPG or solo D&D, and I'm like, I write. I don't need solo D&D, right? I write books. It's cool. For me, D&D has always felt like a found or a chosen family. And as someone with a family has always been a big part of my life, but also a very complicated, how do I say this without causing
Without your
strife?
mother executing you,
Yeah, it's complicated. We'll just say that there's a lot of complications. There's
Relationship
a lot of
status,
emotions.
it's complicated.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't necessarily trust or expect your actual family, your real life family relationships to change for the better, be they chosen or blood. But you kind of can expect your character, your friends in TTRPG, your character's chosen families to grow and become better. And there really is something comforting in that. Part of what, when I was pitching Godplane to David, because I was like, I want to do this thing and I need your help, so please help me. Here's what I've got. It was a horror campaign. We told a 10-part horror campaign, and we did very mean things to our players, and it was wonderful. But part of how I pitched it was like, I want them to go through hell, but I want the payoff to be really good. And so when I was building out Godplane in my brain, I didn't know who our players, much less who the characters were going to be. But I kind of had archetypes of like what kind of characters would go through this world. And so I was able to say like, okay, this would be the character. This would be the thing that they think they are or they know about this. This is what would be revealed. These would be some of their challenges. And in the end, this is how I would end the story. So from the moment my players told me, I want to play this character, this is their background, I was already going, how am I going to torture them? And how am I going to make all of that pay off in the end? How am I going to, like, it was a goal to make every single person, male or female, or anywhere in between, cry. Happy cry, good cry at the end. Have that deep stirring of emotion that, like, I didn't know my character could achieve this, could get this. And I didn't want it to be an obvious thing. Like, oh, your family died. Well, you're reunited with your family. You wish them alive again. That wasn't the ending I wanted. I wanted something that, without my having to say, you now have inner peace, you could have that. And even if it was a bittersweet, even if it was, this is the thing you've always wanted, and you know that it's going to end, but you will have this for a time. That was what I really wanted to give people. Not unending happiness, but meaningful happiness.
An old piece of writing advice that I read was stories don't end with no. If you hit happily ever after, that means the story hasn't gone on long.
I became incredibly unpopular with several of my friends when I said, let's be honest, Beauty and the Beast needed to end where it did because you know that the Beast was abusive.
So that's a whole conversation. One, yes.
He had to do a whole lot of work to get over that temper.
Yes, but also like he did like in the end he reverted back to a human, and how much that temper was like part of why he was cursed was learning the lesson of maybe don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
Um
He learned how to love. He didn't learn don't be an asshole.
there's a little that Venn diagram overlaps a little bit.
It does, but if I don't think we saw his temper all the way through, and yes, he gentled a little. But do you really think he never flew off the handle in an unacceptable way and never had to go? I just backtracked a little, let me go work on me.
Yeah, and what I'd argue is that what he came away with was not a solution to his anger issues and his emotional instability, but the compassion and recognition that that emotional instability has a negative impact on others, like getting everyone he's ever known cursed, and preventing him from like finding love. Uh, but now he is equipped with the tools that he needs to unpack those things and take that step back and go, listen, I'm sorry, this is what I did, and then like learn and change and better over time. Now, if we got to see that, that would be dope. But we're talking about a fairy tale older than what, 100 years?
Yeah, pretty old. But yeah, so, God, we have usually we like start on a topic and really dive into it, and then move on to the next, and we've just kind of everywhere today, which is, I mean, that's right, because storytelling and what we do is more than just one thing, so it makes sense that we're all over. Another when it comes to storytelling and GMing specifically, I don't know if you had time to watch it, David. I don't think you did, but
Not yet.
Critical Role put out an incredible roundtable between Matt Mercer, Brennan Lee Mulligan, and Abria Eingard, all people who GM'd within the Critical Role world. And it is, if you run games on stream or at home, it is so well worth your time to watch. It is so informative and very funny. It is so freaking funny. They go on about getting caught doing voices by their spouse, by their partner. And I'm like, oh, I'm so happy I live alone because my cats don't judge me for the voices, at least not any more than when they normally judge me. Oh God, I was saying something. Okay, Matt, the Exandria. What did I want to say about the Exandria Roundtable? I had a thought, and it's run away.
These things happen.
Yeah.
But while you circle back to that, there was one more thing I wanted to add about
Go, please.
the mundane. Sometimes people want and Kay is the sort of like head cheerleader for playing off the beaten path characters.
I
Like
don't know
if
what
you
you're
want to
talking
play
about.
a half tabaxi, like warlock artificer, dual class, then K probably has one mocked up already. But there is not just viable, but someone that can thrive as a I'm a fighter, I have a longsword, and I'm a mercenary. Like the most generic D&D character. Um and I've talked to people who are like, listen, I just want to play, you know, a warlock who is beholden to their patron, and they just go around like blasting things. And what I always tell them is that while all of us have the same needs, like everyone needs food and water, everyone needs love, everyone needs all these basic things. Um, Conversely, we also all want different things. And so if what you want out of the D&D experience is um, you know, that you want to just inhabit this world in, for lack of a better word, a generic way, that can be really interesting and really engaging. Um, and if you want the power fantasy, if you want to do good, if you want to perform a big heist, if you want to save the world and, topple a great evil, if you want to usurp the great evil, there are all of those things are valid in D&D, and if you want that experience, go for it. Be clear with your DM, be clear with your fellow players, because it gets a little awkward if it's like four role players and a min maxer all at the same table. Um, but do those things, have that experience. Um, I personally know three different people where they bring the exact same character and the exact same class to every game they play, and they have the same character written up in four different systems because that's it. That's who I play. The end. And that's just as valid as someone who cooks up a different food themed hero every single game they play.
Who does that?
Um, right. And um, and also, like, even if it is quote unquote a generic experience, don't discount it, because some of the great role playing um elements have been and we found it in our home game. There were two mercenaries, two fighters who were doing regular guard duty and who mourned the loss of one of their fellow mercenaries and found love and had this like big, complicated, interesting, moving um, experience with each other, mostly off screen. But it was two fighters who fought, who were mercenaries and occasionally had drinks, and they could have been the blandest, most two-dimensional characters, but then through the actions of the players they developed into something more, and um and a richer storytelling experience, both for them individually and for the players. um
And only one of us
so
got
don't
punched in that process.
right so don't discount, uh quote unquote the mundane or something generic, because you don't know if that is precisely the thing that someone is looking for. And the other thing to remember is a lot of people watch a lot of actual plays, um, and are sitting at home wishing they can play D&D, and they see, like, the tabaxis and the dragonkin and all these things, and then they sit down to play and they go flip flip flip, and they're like, you know what, level one dumb barbarian is something I haven't seen and I haven't played. Maybe this is what I'm gonna do. And so you never know when that thing that you consider generic is a brand new experience for someone as well.
And we don't play like playing D&D is a form of storytelling. You are telling a story. It is collaborative storytelling. Everyone tells a story because there is something inside them that they need to let out, they need answered, they need to find. There is a need. There is a reason you are playing that character. And you might not even be able to put it into words. But usually, like, if you watched Voltron, the Voltron remake, Shiro-ish plays a paladin in D&D and dies. And they're like, okay, you come back. And he's like, I'm his twin brother, also a paladin. And they're like, you can play anything. He's like, I want to play a paladin. They're like, you're a paladin in real life. He's like, yeah, I want to play a paladin. And then, like, at the end, they're like, okay, well, maybe we'll do another game later. He's like, great, I could play a paladin.
Right.
And everyone's laughing, but, like, it's a need. There is something in there. And, I will say this, and I'm sorry, y'all, I'm going to point to Critical Role. But,
yeah, that bingo square.
People, I like to play some weird stuff. I do play occasionally some very, I mean, like, let's be fair, Roxy is a very basic paladin. What makes her interesting is my weird flavoring, right? So she's a very basic class. There's really nothing homebrew about her. There's just, outside of the stuff David pushed on me.
Yep, but, like, there's plenty of homebrew about her.
I don't know what it is yet. But, like, I can go into any game and be like, I'm playing a paladin with a flying spaghetti monster. It's Oath of the Ancients. I'm just going to flavor everything like pasta. And GMs are like,
Okay.
Okay. If you look at Critical Role, if you look at Grog, played by
Yes.
Travis.
Yes.
Basic barbarian. Int of 6. Can't even read. Big and dumb. One of the most brilliantly done dumb character. Like, dumb characters, basic characters. If you look at Liam with Orym in Exandria Unlimited or Campaign 3, it's a fighter. Oh my goodness, the way he uses those moves, the way he describes them. He's a teeny tiny ballet dancer with a sword. And it's like, how often do you see a fighter described as a ballet dancer? Not that often. Even my himbo bard, right? Actually fairly basic. I just put a lot of weird lore and weird quirks into him. His class is totally normal. Now, I am also 100% Team Taliesin. I want to play a barbarian but make it weird and complex. Yes, I would also 100% be down for that. A lot of people look at, this homebrew super complex barbarian class and are like, they look at me showing up and going, I'm playing a tiefling who was chosen as an Aasimar, who has navy blue skin and white freckles. So when she uses her Aasimar inner light, she turns into a galaxy light and just sprays starlight everywhere. And they feel like they need to hit this certain level in order to be in an actual play. Let me tell you, there is nothing better than a straight man. Than a simple, everyman character. Like, playing Bilbo Baggins, just looking around and being like, I don't want to go on an adventure. Why are we doing this?
That's what makes all of the Lord of the Rings work. Is because in The Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins is like, huh, who are you? What are you doing? And he's like, nope, get in the car, we're going.
So again, mundane in every sense. Your story can be mundane. There's a game called Dish Pit Witches, which sooner or later I am going to run. Actually, absolutely. I want David to run it. I am desperate for David to play Dish Pit Witches. It is a brilliant, I think it's $3 to $5 on itch.io. Dish Pit Witches. You are a bunch of people who work at a restaurant in the food service industry. Your GM is your general manager who is out to sabotage you. And it is you and your friends using gay magic to try and screw over your GM and survive the day.
Ooh, it's on sale.
Mundane, but brilliant. Never underestimate the mundane in your character. Now, if you are playing a mundane character and you never want to do anything, and you never do anything funny, and you never... Okay, that's going to get a little bit old. If you're going to play a character who doesn't want to do anything, you got to be a little bit witty. If you're going to play a barbarian who's going to just hit everything every time, might want to try to give them a little bit of a personality, right? That's what makes Grog great. David ran. He's like, I didn't want to like Grog.
Right.
He watched the animated series Legend of Vox Machina and was like, I hate how much I love Grog, because he was dumb. He'd do the dumb thing every time, but he'd do it in a brilliant way.
What really sold me on Grog was Kay sent me this clip from Critical Role where I forget Ashley's character's name, but it was a shopping episode. Pike is trying to teach Grog how to write his own name. And it is just this hilarious, slapstick, absurd, but also really touching moment between the two of them. And you're just like, how can you not love these two? How can you not be on their team?
Yes. And Saucefire chimed in to say off screen somewhere, a couple of scientists are trying to catch Kay with a comically large net. I will not be caught.
Right. They're trying.
Nope.
But what about what Dungeon Mr. Ty said? Because I haven't seen it yet, but would that Critical Role piece be suggested viewing for Novus DMs?
Definitely. They talk a lot about, so they do a great, like, they talk a lot of questions. They all have their own unique style of DMing. So, like, they spend a lot of time on world building, which is awesome, because they're like, okay, Matt, Mr.
Right.
This is 2 continents and 1 adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more. Like, this isn't... And they ask, they're like, how far did you get, Matt, before you felt like Exandria was done? Or Tal'Doria was done? And he's like, I'm not there yet. I don't feel that yet. And Brennan's like, he dead ass looked in the camera and said, not yet, while holding this up. And this is 1 continent. If this isn't done, what is? Right? So they just went in on each other. It was really great. Like, it's so savage. But Matt talks about, like, he started this game as a one-shot. And then people were like, that was great, let's do more. So he was like, okay, I'm making this town. Oh, well, now we're going to do another game, so here's, like, 2 other towns and a thing, and it'll be like this. And then, like, his world kept growing, and then after a point he was like, I think I have to make the whole thing. I think I have to make more, right? That's how it started for him. Brennan was saying, because Brennan Lee Mulligan, for those of you who don't know, runs Dimension 20. And brilliant. They're shorter form, so they're not long form. Every one has like a certain number of episodes, and they have to get through the plot. Also, it's a very big set piece game, so they have sets pre-made, so they have to get to each of those sets. Yes, world building via the necessity of answering new questions. Yes.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Brennan was saying, I mean, it's not like some jerk face would just stick a couple new locations on the map and say, I put some stuff here because it looked like stuff needed to be there, and then someone go, who would do that?
Yep, and now there's a tower.
But like Brennan said, he makes up about 30% of his world. He gets the basic idea, he kind of gets the idea for the world, the idea for the setting, what the kind of story is going to be, what's the theme. And then he takes it to his players and says, what do you think? Hey, Candace! He says, okay, what do you think we should make within this? And then he waits for the players to come back with stuff. And his exact quote was like, oh, no one wants to play a cleric, don't develop gods. Like, get to skip that whole part for this mini-timed campaign because no one's gonna need it. Or if they do need it, they don't need it super deep dive because there's no clerics. Oh, Candace! I don't know if you all saw Candace's amazing partner, Domo, made amazing emotes, which he has donated to my channel. So there is now a sword and a rainbow D20.
Oh my god.
Yes. Yes. Aren't they beautiful? If you're watching this on YouTube, they are beautiful. So, you know, they do that. Brennan also said, they also, a thing that we talked about in a previous episode, they dove in on, which is like, what do you do when people, A, don't have enough character backstory, or B, have 40 pages of character backstory? Which, you know, both are a problem in their own way.
I'm glad someone recognizes that one of those might be a problem. But continue.
Abria is like, oh, hey, so if someone gives me too much backstory and I'll pull them aside before the game and be like, hey, what is, and she's like, they'll tell me in that moment the 2 or 3 things that's most important. Hey, there's Domokami himself, the amazing artist and creator of those emotes. She would say, you know, hey, what a time to come into a show. We love you. She would say, like, she'll pull them aside and be like, okay, tell me about blah, blah, blah. And she's like, they'll tell me 3 or 4 things that are the most important, and those are the things I can take and run with. And Brennan's like, this is your character's backstory, all of this. This is your... So you just handed me 300 pages of plot hooks that you will latch onto every time? Great. I'm lazy. I will take this. He's like,
right.
I can spend days building a creepy, awesome necromancer. And you walk into the pub, and I say, there's this creepy necromancer in the corner. And the party every time will say, fuck that guy. Tell me about that guy.
Yep.
Said, whereas, if I go, okay, you walk into the bar and... there's your uncle, the one you swore to kill, sitting right there. I know the players will take that. So I like this. But that is a lot of backstory. I am guilty of writing a 13-page backstory for a character.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't write it for my GM, I wrote it for me. I was coming in at level 7. It was a character who had a lot of background. Hey, Youngles! What's up, Jen? I didn't write it for the GM. Sometimes I have to write a character story out for myself to know what the heck this character has been up to. And then I put a page of TLDR with bullet points of who are these characters, what are the places, what's the relationship, so my GM can take them and hurt me with them.
And you've also done, so here's the rough skeleton of my character, but these things I don't know about my character.
Yes.
I want to find out about them.
That and we've talked about this in a previous episode, and I know we will again, because character backstories are a whole thing. A lot of people are afraid of the 40-page character backstory because it's like, well, if you've written 40 pages, what's left for your character to do? And I'm like...
so much.
Do you not see the hot mess that I built? I built an actual mess of a character. Like, all of that was set up so that there's like 16 characters that you can pull out at any given time. Or I can just be like, oh, there's... You're telling me there's a gang here? Is that the gang that I used to belong to? I don't know. Oh no, now I have to be paranoid that everywhere I go, my old gang might find me. Like, I have built this background. So there is a danger of if you build too much backstory. Yeah, no, I don't have to do that. I'm not afraid of that. You don't build who Homelander thinks he is. Build what Homelander is if you're gonna do 40 pages of backstory.
Right.
I either do a full PowerPoint presentation or the bare minimum, says Jen.
And it's awesome because, so, anybody who does a deep dive into storytelling always knows that there's always more than one thread winding through a story. And I find that the most engaging stories are ones where everybody's got to worry about the big bad, whatever their main objective is, but that each character has things that they have to worry about, both um, their own individual goals and their past catching up with them.
And so, real quick backtrack before I go completely off. Yes, I would absolutely say the Exandria World Building GM Roundtable with Matt Mercer, Brie Eingar, and Brennan Lee Mulligan is amazing for, I'm going to say any level of GM, because they actually drop a lot of knowledge from rails, when to use them, what they are and are not, because Abria, I think this is what I was maybe going for before when I completely lost it. Abria they were talking about rails and how do you keep people on, and Abria, and then Brennan brought it around and kind of articulated on it before. Everyone wants to tell their character's story in D&D. And this is, I'm going to circle back to this at a later time, but like someone asked, I was asked recently, I haven't played D&D in a long time, I'm trying to get back into it, what are your tips? Like, what do I need to do to be good at the table? Well, my number one tip is listen. Don't just be interested in your own character. Listen to what the other players and characters are saying. Find ways to reference things that they've said. Find ways to bring them into scenes with you. Find excuses to talk to them and reference their past. And that is going to make you a very popular player, because then you will get your moments of performance. You will be liked because other people know that you're engaging with them and giving them giving them the spotlight. And you will help your GM drive the story forward. You will help bring out those emotional scenes. Abria talks about, she thinks of it, and Brennan echoed this, they think of it less as rails, especially, so in a streamed game, in an actual play, especially if there's a certain number of episodes that you gotta get stuff in. We did some interesting rail work in Godplane, less than you would actually think. Far less than you would actually think. But Abria talks about everyone wants their character's story told. And every human, I can't speak for all the androids or other things out there, has an understanding of something like music. And you can feel that third act coming. You can feel something coming to crescendo. You can dangle a thread in front of a player. And if it is one of those things their character cares about, they will automatically fall into line. They will automatically align with that harmony to get that moment, to get that payoff for their characters. Hey, Todd, thank you for lurking. We got everyone up in the house now. Thank y'all.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And I think that's kind of a great way to approach the rails question, which is, Matt Mercer did this in Campaign 1 when Vox Machina, the Golden Heroes, went a little bit off the path and started killing grannies. He had to do some kind of punishment to get them back into line. And that's one way you can do it, but you can also start and he did a much more firm-handed, but he also did some subtler things where a character was interested in one of his NPCs, his very lawful good NPCs, and then after they did some bad stuff, that NPC started shutting them out. If you're setting things up for if you're setting things up for a character development, for a relationship, for a moment, people want those scenes. So if you dangle it in front of them, they will generally just align to it. They also talk a lot about actual plays versus home games, world building. It's a great thing, and you should watch it. And I was going to transition from that into something else, and I spent so long on that I've now forgotten what that other thing was. Hello, Jessica! You can tell when the new beat or change is happening. Yes. It's like how DJ doing with their ice sets. Yes, exactly. You can, and it's, we were talking about, you had said, David, it's everyone's got to worry about the big bad, but everyone also has their own things.
Yep.
Absolutely. It's also really fun when you can surprise players by making it so multiple people have their goals or their concerns all tied to the same thing, but they didn't realize that at the start. We did this a little bit in Godplane, where now this is one of my proudest moments because even one of my mods who modded Godplane, who helped us with it, who watched all of it, thought all the players knew this. I made it so two of the characters had connecting stories, and they didn't know that it was connecting stories, and they discovered their connection in game through their own conversations and the bits of lore that I had fed to them. He thought that was prepped. He thought all the players knew that, but it was like,
Yep.
no, they discovered it in game. And I don't want to like say things to like spoil things, but different games do this. This happens, and without spoiling too much, in Emergency Power podcast. I'll spoil a little bit of season 2. At the end of season 2, there's a big bad that one of the characters has been chasing, who's been doing bad stuff to his family, threatening his family. We come to find out that, oh, that person has done other things to other members of the party as well. It was unexpected. It's a great big galaxy. And it just made all of us, even though like my character doesn't has skin in this fight, oh, my character is so ready to do all sorts of bad, mean things to this big bad. Because this big bad has now messed with not just one, but multiples of their teammates. And how bad does that make this big bad if he's done both A and B and potentially C as well? It's so juicy. And I can't say anymore because it's still that we haven't resolved that thread yet.
There's a lot of storytelling tropes where, you know, the big reveal at the end is the big bad that they've been chasing this whole time is someone's father or grandfather or like, you know, ex-husband. Right. And when done poorly, it's really cliche. It's really tacky, but it is important that all of your players, and you know, if you're writing something, that all of your characters have skin in the game, that there is a personal effect that is being molded by their behavior. And sometimes, you know, you have to face your dad and be like, well, am I gonna kill you? Or you know, sometimes it's like the colonel that's going around and doing bad things happens to be the brother of the head of the group, and so on and so forth. And like I said, they're cheesy, tacky, sloppy, lazy ways to do that. But circling back to the whole idea of interconnectedness, like no one's story is on an island, no one's experiences are on an island. We're all bound together in some way. And the more you can throw glue and cement onto those bindings between characters, then the more impactful the end is. Like, look at Lord of the Rings. You know, you run into Gollum and, you know, they end up hucking Gollum into the volcano. And Gandalf says to them, right, yeah, yeah, spoiling that 50-year-old book. But Gandalf says to them, is like, listen, don't judge him too harshly. He comes from your hometown. He was just like you guys. And then, you know, they think about it and they go, wait, who is he related to that we know? And you know, the same thing with like Aragorn and Boromir, and the same thing with like Aragorn and the elves, and like the whole like a human marrying an elf, and all these different things within the Lord of the Rings is all tying the fellowship together. It's not just a bunch of warriors got together and marched across and then threw the ring in. There were all these deeply personal things that were happening. And there were also deeply personal consequences uh, of their victory. Like, for a lot of people, you could argue that victory was Pyrrhic. Like, not everybody came out smelling like daisies at the end of that. And so it's important to recognize the how essential it is to have some skin in the game, to have some personal commitment to the overarching story, in addition to your quote unquote like professional uh, commitment to it.
I'm going to make 2 quick points. One is don't be afraid, especially if, like, I like, how you doing, Vivian? I like God playing. When I was telling people to make their characters, I'm like, I want you to make a character who's a big deal in your world, right? And some people don't want to play it. We had, you know, Cassandra wanted Willie to be at the beginning of her journey, and that was great. We worked with it. But if someone comes in with a character who's got a history, feed some half-truths to some of your other characters. Have some of the other characters have heard stories that are exaggerated or not true or spun because they're from another country where this character isn't as popular. That can cause some really fun inter-character conflicts. Like, the truth is in the eye of the beholder. The truth is in the hands of the historians. Don't be afraid to get a little fast and loose with exactly what is the truth. 2, absolutely, if you can find ways to take major characters from major NPCs from your characters' backstories and involve them in the plot, it's an excellent way to get them involved. I would encourage you to speak to your players about that before you do something along the lines of a betrayal arc or something like that, because a lot of people play TTRPGs for various reasons, and sometimes the characters and their backstories are based off of real family members that they've lost. Or it can even just be they have a story that they need to tell, and that story is, my character has a family at home that loves them. Because maybe I don't actually have that. Maybe my family is not supportive of my life, my choices, who I am. And maybe I just need to know that if I go home, someone will be in my corner. And if you go, like, and I'm not, if there is a character in my backstory, please use them to hurt me, right? That is me personally. But for some people, if they go home and they find out that their sibling has been plotting against them the whole time.
Or someone decides to play a ranger with like a tiger, and you didn't know that they named the tiger after their cat growing up, and then you go kill the tiger, you're gonna have a bad time.
I'm only looking at you a little bit, Saucefire, because this maybe almost happened in a 0 session. Maybe. But yes, it's better, like, everyone's like, oh, no. As a GM, I have to really surprise my players. I promise you, if you sit down with your players and you say, hey, so I'm looking at your backstory. I'm thinking maybe we could do this. Do you think, what do you think your relationship was with so-and-so? Do you think there's maybe something we could do with them plotting against you? That is not going to ruin a surprise. Maybe the player will be a little bit more paranoid about it. If they're good and don't meta, it's all fine. In fact, before a Thirsty Sword Lesbians game, you know, I remember Connie was asking Candace, like, hey, like, what do you think maybe your sister is, like, plotting against you? And we're like, cool. None of us expected, even with the background that the sister might have her own ends, none of us expected that to go the way it did. And if anything, it made it a little bit more fun because we kind of were aware that she was up to something. And it's like, oh, we spotted it. Oh no, that was so much more than we thought. And if you've not watched the Thirsty Sword Lesbians, donations are still open till the end of the week. We played Thirsty Sword Lesbians every Tuesday in June. We raised $2,100 for the Trevor Project. All of the videos just hit Todd Moonbounce's channel today. So if you would like to watch some really amazing queer stories for charity, a great good time, please go check them out. Okay, there's a whole bunch of things in the comments that I'm going to read now. Recycle a few NPCs, GMs, rather than creating a line of thousands that no one will care about. Exactly. Also, you'll make the coolest NPC in your mind. The players won't care. They'll want to know about, like, some rando that they encountered in the bar. So just, you know, don't... Zycrim says, in a campaign where death is very on the line, I suddenly want to have 4 character sheets. First one playing be the bard who spins the tales of the other 3. Yes, that would be very fun. David says, fun fact, you make 1,000 player characters or know someone who does, you can steal them and make them NPCs. I'm a little attacked. Steal ask them first. Oh my goodness. Just don't warn the DM, because they'll find ways to make your bard survive. That's funny. Thirsty and lesbians. Such a combination. Yes, and they were the thirstiest of sword lesbians. And I had a really cool rapier. That's all I'm saying. Whew! That's the best. I love asking my players about their families and friends. They will spin such a yarn. Yes, I may have just... I'm so proud. I delivered Saucefire, a character sheet, for a game that we're going to be playing, and it wasn't that long.
It was only 12 pages? Got it.
It is 1 page and a paragraph.
Wow.
Now, I also have a couple paragraphs for goals. Her goals, her fears, and her physical description. So all in all, that makes it like 2 pages and 2 paragraphs. But again, I'm trying to give the GM easy hooks.
Right.
And yes, gave family, gave all that, because I remember one of my favorite moments, David, was when I was first crafting Vimond, and none of y'all have met Vimond yet, because I have still not gotten to play Vimond. Someday I will get to. And I was kind of finishing up the history, and look, we talk about the mundane. We talk about that thing, like showing up and playing the same character every time. I will never judge anyone for playing the mundane or wanting to play the same character every time, because I want to play an edgelord every time. I love edgelords so much, and like Soul might be glittery and pretty, but they're an edge monarch. They are the monarch of edge, and they just hide it really well behind glitter and gold. Vimond is my edgelord, my OG D&D edgelord. And I was finishing up his history, and I sent some snippets of it, because not all of it, because it's too long. Sent some snippets of it to David. And I think the line, I sent him the paragraph about the history with the family, and it ended with a focus on his mom. And I believe the line is, she loved him as much as she was capable of loving anything other than herself. And David's like, you take that out of there. You take that out of there right now. That's gonna hurt you. I'm like, I know, I want it to hurt.
And it will. And it will.
Oh, it will. It'll hurt so bad, and I'm so excited. And I know how I would hurt me with that setup. It's always fun to see how someone else would hurt me with that setup. I had a character that I showed it to you, David, and you're like, that would be the big, like, that sibling would be the big bad of the campaign. And then
immediately.
I sent it to the GM that I was actually playing that character with, and she was like, oh, I have ideas. And I'm like, my friend said she'd be the big bad of the campaign, and she's like, oh. How would you feel if she had her own dread domain? And I'm like,
Ooh.
Don't tell me anymore. Yes, go do it. She's like, because that means, I'm like, I know what it means. Just do it. It's gonna hurt so good.
Wow.
And then I don't have to be the centerpiece for, like, I don't need the whole campaign to circle around my character. My character will take enough of the spotlight as it is. So, we're rambling. We've made it an hour and a half into this. We're at the winding down period. The original topic, believe it or not, was storytelling, and why we tell stories in D&D, TTRPGs, why it's important now more than ever in these dark times. Like, even though the world is terrible, why are we messing around with this? Because stories help us find ourselves. Because stories help us learn to overcome hardships. Because stories help us endure, and stories distract us from the terribleness. Stories are how we learn our place in the world. Stories are how we learn what we as humanity as a whole are capable of, good and bad. And stories allow us to take back just a little bit of power.
And something I'd like to add is how you feel matters. And I know that seems self-evident, but it's not for a lot of people. And so there are people who will get stuck in this, I have to do things, I have to move forward. And even if they do check in with how they're feeling, they'll go, okay, well, I feel such and such, but I don't have time to deal with that now. How you feel matters. Like your personal happiness has an impact on your life and the people around you. And even if you want to get out of the sort of like esoteric, like touchy-feely aspect of your feelings matter, you know, there are tons and tons of studies about how stress and depression and anxiety and all these other bad feelings that we have impact us physiologically. Um, and so, you know, your health will deteriorate if you just continue to feel terrible. Um, and if you are engaging with a piece of media, um, and that piece of media makes you feel better, that's all the reason that you need. Now, this is not advocating, you know, running away from your problems and throwing yourself into 2,400 hours worth of Monster Hunter, which I don't know anyone who's done that.
Neither
But
of us have escaped into Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley for
yeah,
thousands of hours.
ooh, I've played so much Stardew Valley. No,
We don't look at the playtimes on my Pokemon games.
right, yeah, ooh, oh, listen, I will take that number to my grave.
That was only one game. That was only
Right.
one game on one of my Switches, and I have been playing Pokemon since Red and Blue.
I took a peek at one number from one game for 1 year, and I will take that number to my grave.
It was
But I
also during
will
the
say,
pandemic, so.
I didn't think it was possible for my respect and admiration for Kay to increase, and yet it did.
And he judged me as well.
I
It's like,
mean,
respect, judge. Respect.
you can't
judge.
you can't get away from me without judgment. But yeah, like there are all these other reasons to engage with media, especially when times are tough. Like um, many years ago, when I was in high school, my father went into the hospital with he had a quadruple bypass and then a heart attack, and then he died for a little while. Then he came back and he was fine. But I listened to the Blade soundtrack about 8 million times, like on CD back when CDs were a thing. And even now, if I'm listening to music and like a song from Blade comes up, it will put me right back in the waiting room, like the lobby at a hospital, at a very specific hospital that actually isn't there anymore. Um, and for me, that isn't a bad memory because, you know, it worked out at the end. Um, but you know, there are all sorts of travel articles that are like, put together a new playlist for when you go traveling, and so every time you listen to that music, it'll transport you back. Like, media has such a huge impact on who we are and the stories we tell and how we feel, especially at particularly dangerous or distressing times. And so, if whatever media you engage with can be that light at the end of the tunnel or a candle flame in a dark room, then do that. Like there's no reason not to make yourself feel better with the media that you are engaging with.
And the media can do interesting things to you, both in
Yeah.
and out of the game, and come full circle. So my full circle story is when I started playing Soul for Emergency Power Podcast. We decided we were going to do playlists for all the characters. So I started building a playlist, and like he Soul reacted so badly to this thing in their life. He what a silly, ridiculous way to react to this, granted not good, very terrible thing that happened, which we're not going to talk about because that's not revealed yet. But like building this playlist, like I know what these songs mean and what they reference, and the audience won't. So I had this playlist built, and then I lost my Opie cat. And for those of you who don't know, I had Opie for 16 years. He was my best friend. And I suddenly discovered that as I was mourning his loss, the playlist I was listening to was Soul. All I wanted to do was listen to Soul's playlist because I was reacting to this loss the exact way I had gone, isn't it? What a ridiculous way for this character to react. So I'm like, oh no, I am telling on myself, number one. Number two, I now know that I gotta watch out for this, right? I had kind of trained myself to not spiral because I'd already gone, well, this is how this character reacts. Oh, apparently that's how I react to this situation. And now when that playlist comes on and I'm getting, whenever we get to this point where we're gonna face this thing, I'm going to be tapping into that real world grief and that real world loss because that playlist has come full circle. And it's amazing how you tell on yourself. You create characters, you tell stories that you need to tell. Like my Himbo Bard. I'm like, haha, I don't know where this character came from. And then at some point I'm like, oh no, David, it's my manic depression turned up to 11. And David's like, yeah, duh. Like, I needed an outlet for that, apparently. So all that to say, and this is again circling back to like, don't be ashamed of the mundane. Don't be ashamed if you're telling the story. Don't be ashamed if you're telling something that you think is maybe ridiculous, because it resonates with other people, and it might resonate with you in a way you don't realize. There's whatever character you're driven to play, there's a reason for that. And maybe you're like me and you want to play a really ridiculously over-the-top tiefling who glows like a galaxy light because she's also an ASMR. Or maybe you're someone who wants to play a healer who believes that magic is a completely divine gift, and so you never use magic aggressively. So someone go boop the thing on the nose, because I'm not casting spells against it. And that's just your whole thing, is I'm a super do-gooder cleric. Who would play that? I don't know. David.
Yeah.
Whatever story you're needing to tell, there's a reason for it. And it's something you're trying to figure out. But also, as David said, humans, fundamentally, we all kind of need the same things. So if you need to tell this story, that means there's probably someone else out there who needs to hear it. And regardless, that might be someone sitting at your table, or that might be a stranger on the internet if you're doing an AP. But don't be afraid to tell whatever story that is that you need to tell. Chat, we have gone on for quite a while. Any remaining questions about storytelling, about why we tell stories? Again, I'm going to reference the Critical Role. If you watched Calamity, Brennan Lee Mulligan was a guest GM for a 4-part series called Calamity. It is a tragedy. It is heartbreaking. It is the Rogue One of Critical Role. It is some of the best storytelling. It is so anxiety driven. It is wonderful. It is heartbreaking. He ends this story. And let me assure you, it doesn't have a happily ever after. It doesn't end on a high note. And he, narrates, this is what happens. And immediately after he finishes the narration, he looks into the camera and says, "Why do we tell stories?" And Brennan Lee Mulligan, who knows more about human nature and human psyche and is just ridiculously good at what he does this whole narration about we tell stories to try and understand our world. And we tell tragedies of this nature so we can try to understand the tragedy outside our door. So whatever story you need to tell, and look, I'll be the first to say right now, I can't engage with gritty, dark, modern games. I can't do it. I can do horror. I can't do gritty, dark, modern. I'm incapable. Because all of this is too much for me right now. But other people need to play that out. And other people need calamity to get through it. And other people need these things. And some people need a fun little romp in the Feywild. And some people need to worship the flying spaghetti monster as a half-orc and wear a colander to sessions. And some people need to fly through the stars and be shitty to their teammates because they don't know how to express love in a healthy way. Whatever it is you need to tell, you need to tell it, and you should tell it, and you shouldn't let what you think is appropriate or what other people will say, well, it's dark, things are hard right now, so don't tell dark stories. No, when things are dark, you often need to tell dark stories. I'm going to get off my soapbox here and just say, we tell stories to help us understand the world. We tell stories to help us distract ourselves from the world. We learn stories to learn what we are capable of. And please, go out and tell your stories. Thoughts, questions, anything else in the chat? Throw it. David, I'm going to stop talking. I know you've got something to say. Take it, David.
I mean, I always have something to say. That is one of my character flaws. But also remember, when it comes to D&D, as a DM, yes, you orchestrate the overall story, the big bad that everybody has to face. You are the one who builds the challenges that your players encounter. But remember that the story is also don't get caught up. Yeah, there's a line to ride between doing it just for the players and trying to bully your players into doing what you want them to do. Remember that it is your story to tell too. And what I do is I make sure to put in elements and to put in situations and to put in NPCs that I think are important, that I think should be expressed. And in some cases that are representative of people I know in real life.
Rudica.
Right. And so don't forget that as a DM, while you're balancing all the spinning plates of the individual stories for each of your characters, the background and sort of escalating world that you have and all the NPCs in it, but also, and also the overarching story. Within all of that, if you've got stories to tell those stories too. Because it is on you to share with your players, just like it's on your players to share with you about their characters, about their backstories, about the conflicts that they have, about the history they have, and about the future that they have. So as a DM, don't be afraid to share those as well.
And don't be afraid to share your cat.
Right.
I'm amazed at how chill he's been, because he's been full of murder all day. Easiest way to make great characters is mixing in the personal experience of yourself or someone else. Yes, there's a
Absolutely.
There's an episode of Between the Sheets, which is way less risque than it sounds. It was a thing that Critical Role did briefly, and they were interviewing Taliesin Jaffe, and he was talking about all of his characters are based off of people that he knew or has known. And it's a beautiful deep dive into psychology and all that. So, I think that's going to conclude our show today. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. Chat has just been amazing. I've had so much fun discussing with you all. I'm glad I got to show a little kitten as a thank you.
Right.
Always got to pay the cat tax. Y'all have been amazing. Look at those beautiful emotes being spammed. Thank you all so much for hanging out.
Oh no, that's something that's going to end up in a game sometime.
Oh boy.
So I'm just not gonna comment on that.
He's leaving us hanging, y'all. So I'm Kay. I am your co-host. My wonderful co-host over here is David Lee, aka Full Rubber Ducky. We're working on having some more actual plays up soon. Thank you for hanging out. In the meantime, David, before I do my whole thing, do you have anything to promote?
I am working on things for the Chaotic Wholesome brand, and there should be updates by the end of July.
Amazing. I'm excited. So again, I'm Kay. I'm your host. You can find us here every Tuesday doing this. If you have topics or things you would like for us to cover, give us a shout. We like to hear from y'all. We got stuff to talk about. We would love to talk about things that you want to hear. If you have something you'd like to promote or come on and talk about yourself, please do. I know there's a couple of you I've been threatening to drag on and talk about things. Please don't be shy. I'm on Twitch. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Discord. Ping us. We would love to have more guests. Makes it easier on us, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Every Wednesday. Tomorrow will be the next episode, and then the following July 20th, you can find me as Soul on the Emergency Power podcast at emergencypowernetwork.com. And then coming up this Saturday, July 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern, early game, I will be on Gamer Mom Luna's channel playing D&D 5e for charity for Extra Life. I will be playing Roxy, my half-orc paladin of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. So you can see some of my chaos in action there.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
It's going to be fun. Last time I played her in a charity game, it was with Gabe Hicks, and she actually got to meet the Flying Spaghetti Monster. So we'll see what happens the next time. Is there a stream Discord? I have a Discord for my D&D stuff. I am grabbing the link and dropping it into a chat. There we go. You're all welcome. We do, when we start doing actual plays, we'll be using this for casting calls. We'll be using this for any art we get. We highlight clips. We post a lot of memes. We post D&D talk. There's all sorts of good stuff. Come hang out.
And eventually there will be private games as well. So please stay tuned, especially if you want to play.
Yes. So I think that's all we have. Thank you all for hanging out with us. You've been amazing. We've had fun. I'm speaking for you, David.
Yeah.
And we're going to flip over to the end screen and find someone to raid. Thank you again for hanging with us, and we will see you next week. Be good to each other, y'all. Take care of yourselves. It's rough out there. Bye, y'all.